asking God, what amount do you want me to give? I heard God say, your time. I was ready at that moment to write a check for my life savings, to give my life savings away. But I was working 6, 8 to 12-hour days a week, and I barely had any free time to call my own, let alone to give away to someone else. I also had a huge lack of experience and education. The majority of people who feel a calling to this ministry feel it in part because of something they've experienced in their past. It could be an unplanned pregnancy, a past abortion, or even a close friend who experienced an unplanned pregnancy. But I, on the other hand, had nothing like that in my past. I also never gained a college degree. I simply graduated from high school and took a few college classes. I was, and still am, the most underqualified person for this job, for this ministry. And yet I knew at that moment God was calling me to join in this mission of pro-abundant life. So in obedience to God, I asked the CareNet director for a volunteer application, and I met about a month later for an interview. The only day that I had off of work and available to volunteers was Monday, which, as most of you would know back then, CareNet wasn't open on Mondays. It felt like God was asking something from me that I couldn't give. And I struggled with that for a long time, and weeks went by, and I just couldn't get this thought of CareNet and this ministry out of my head. And one day while I was working, God gave me this crazy thought. What if you quit your job? Quit my full-time job to volunteer? God, are you serious? You see, my job was more than my job. It was a huge part of my financial security. My housing was provided for me. I had health insurance free of charge, and there were a lot of other benefits that were included in my job that I never had to worry about before. And thinking about leaving all of that security behind and stepping out on my own, basically starting from scratch, scared me to death. I struggled with doubt, fear, anxiety, and a lot of questions. But after a lot of prayer and confirmation, I again stepped out in obedience. Putting in my resignation at work was not easy and honestly felt very awkward as I tried my best in my human understanding to make sense of what God was asking me to do. The story of Abraham was brought to my mind by a dearly trusted friend who I felt safe enough to confide in. She reminded me of Hebrews 11:8, which says, "By faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going." There was so much in this calling from God that I didn't understand, but I continued to walk in obedience. And if I could go back today, I would make exactly the same decision all over again. God tested my faith, and it was not easy. It was very uncomfortable. And to be honest, God continues to test my faith, and it's not easy, but it's good. I saw God provide for me, provide for my needs, and come through for me in a way I had never, ever experienced before, and probably never would have had I not left that job. I needed a new part-time job, and God provided a part-time job that I enjoyed, where I got to set my own schedule, and I could have one guaranteed weekday to volunteer at CareNet. And I also began to have Sundays off again, which allowed me to come back to church and then start coming here full-time and calling this place my home, and I just love it. And I also needed a new place to live as my housing had been provided for me. And God provided an apartment that was wonderful for me and surrounded by friendly people in a safe community with a country environment, which is what I grew up in, so I loved that too. A little over a year later, God amazed me again by paving the way for me to be hired as a staff member at CareNet and increase my hours there. Now I am branching out in my responsibilities and enjoying every challenge to grow that is set before me. The first time that I worked with a client at CareNet, I had so much anxiety and I was shaking so badly, kind of like right now, where I could barely fill out the paperwork necessary during her client appointment. I had thoughts running through my mind, such as, what if I say something wrong? What if she's abortion-minded? What if she asks me a question that I don't know the answer to? God would just whisper in my head, trust and obey. Now, 2 years later, to say that I don't get nervous when working with clients would be a lie. But God whispers the same thing every time. It's always just trust and obey. I cannot overestimate the blessings that have come as a result of working with clients. Has it always been easy? No. Have they asked me questions I didn't know the answer to? Oh, yes. And that's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know. I'll do more research on that and get back to you. I've stumbled over my own words and have walked away from client appointments thinking, I should have said this, or I should have referred them there, or why didn't I think of that? But God's grace is sufficient for me. And He knows exactly what that client needs to hear at that moment, and also what they don't need to hear. I simply have to trust and obey. Although I still don't fully understand why God called me to this ministry of CareNet, I know why God called me. Because it's the same reason why God calls all of us. Read any Bible story from the Old or New Testament, and you will find at least one ordinary, unqualified person that God calls to do a job that they know they cannot do. God called Abraham, an old childless man with a barren wife, to be the father of nations. God called Joseph, a teenager, to sacrifice the dreams he had for his future in order to save himself, his family, and his nation from a severe famine. God called Moses, a shy introvert, much like myself, who could barely speak, to confront Pharaoh and command that he grant freedom to all of his Hebrew slaves. God called David, the youngest and the least of 8 children, to defeat the Philistine champion Goliath and then become king over Israel. God called Esther, an orphan in a foreign land, to confront the king without permission, to ask him to save the lives of herself and her people. God called Isaiah, a mere human being, to prophesy about the coming Savior, Jesus Christ. God called the 12 disciples of Jesus, normal, sinful men, to leave everything that they knew behind to become Jesus's closest confidants. And God called Paul, a persecutor of Jesus, to repent of his sins and proclaim the saving gospel of Jesus Christ. We could literally go on forever, but the answer is always the same. God calls specific people to carry out specific missions that they are not qualified for and that are impossible for them to do. Why? so that God alone can receive the glory when that mission is completed. And today I have news for you. This calling that I felt on my life is the same calling that you have on yours. As a church, we've been going through a Bible study through this book called The Disciple Maker's Handbook. And I personally have been challenged and encouraged by the chapters I've read and the discussions that we've had together. And what I want to share with you now is actually very similar to that book in a lot of ways. As far as the driven point, it's the same. It just has a more specific focal point, and that is dealing with life and death decisions inside the church. And it's called Making Life Disciples.
When it comes to the issue of abortion, it has become America's Holocaust.
Since the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, at least 1 million unborn children every year have lost their lives to abortion, and countless women and men have had to suffer from the negative consequences of abortion.
Abortion provides temporary relief, but afterwards comes the bigger package of depression and guilt and shame and sorrow and regret that you live with for many, many years.
I come from a generation where at least a third of my generation isn't here because of abortion. And for me, that's just unconscionable. And I can't live in a society where millions upon millions of my fellow American citizens are not here.
We did a lot of research, and one of the things that we discovered is that there are women in the church having abortions. Our research found that 4 out of every 10 women who has had an abortion was actively going to church at the time of her abortion.
And the reality is that when it comes to the abortion issue and the life issue, the church has not really been using that transformative power that it has around this issue. It's been an issue that's been outside of the church when the problem is inside the church and the church has a call to the broader culture. So we're inspired around this project specifically to do that. This is a tool that will help mobilize the church.
Most pastors I know are concerned about the well-being of people in their church as well as outside of their church. Well, we need to be as equally concerned about the life in the womb. And so because it's an issue of life, and God is the author of life, that we must be in life-related issues. For us, it's a priority, and I think it should be a priority for any pastor who's concerned about comprehensive ministry.
As a Christian, our hope should be Christ's hope. And the last thing that he said was what? Go and make disciples of all nations. And certainly God has really given us an opportunity, a unique opportunity in this day and age in our culture for this life issue to be an amazing vehicle to help make disciples for Jesus Christ.
A life disciple is someone who is willing to work with women and men as they are facing a pregnancy decision.
As a life disciple, we have the honor and the privilege and the blessing of walking with people in the middle of their crisis.
When I was pregnant at 17, I went to our local OBGYN, and he asked me, is this good news or is this bad news? And I said, this is not good news. And he said, well, here's the number for an abortion clinic in New York City. And that was really the extent of the counseling that I had, or the care. It was like, if this is an unplanned pregnancy, abortion is the solution. And if I had a life disciple at 17, I would have chosen life instead of abortion.
What conquers fear is love. And when you envelop this lady with love and encouragement and compassion, that I want to cry with you, I want to laugh with you, I want to embrace you, I want to love you, you've opened up the door to share the gospel. So the Bible is clear that God has authored life, He sustains life, and His goal is that we might have abundant life that Jesus Christ offers. And of course, the church is the best place to offer all of it.
I firmly believe the more educated people are about the abortion issue, the more and more people become pro-life and want to protect unborn children and women and men from the destruction of abortion. Because that's really to the core of how we solve the abortion issue in our country, is to reach the people that it's impacting the most.
Our goal with this curriculum is for people who will be trained as life disciples and who have an opportunity to meet with people who are facing a pregnancy decision. I mean, people who have before them life or death. Our hope and our prayer is that you will help them choose life.
So as you can see, this issue of abortion is not outside the church. It is inside the church. In this video, Vincent DeCaro shares that 4 out of 10 women having abortions claim to be regularly attending church at the time of their abortion. In fact, 54% of women having abortions claim to be Christians. This means that out of roughly 1 million abortions each year, 540,000 abortions are obtained by women in the church. On average, the amount of time between when a woman first takes a pregnancy test to the time that she has an abortion is about 9 days. That means that we as a church have one Sunday to meet her where she's at. She needs to know that she will be accepted here and not judged. She needs to know that she will receive an answer much like Jesus gave to the woman caught in adultery. Neither do I condemn you, but go and sin no more. Imagine the impact if just Christians stopped having abortions. The number of abortions each year would literally be cut in half. Roland Warren put it this way: this is not CareNet's issue, and the church is helping. This is the church's issue, and CareNet is helping. And that is our ultimate goal, especially with this program. Our desire is that CareNet can come alongside of churches and empower churches in the same way that we empower women and men to make life-affirming decisions when facing an unplanned pregnancy. We want to encourage you, I want to encourage you to receive the training and the tools that will help you understand how to be a first responder, how to practically be a first responder in a crisis pregnancy of a man and a woman that you have the opportunity to reach. We each have our own circles, and I can't reach your circle. We can't reach your circle, but you can reach your circle. You know that one person. So maybe God isn't calling you to quit your job like He did me. Maybe He is. Only you know. But God is calling you to give of yourself in a way that seems impossible to you, so that you can make a difference in one person's life by being that first responder in their crisis pregnancy. God is calling you to bring glory to His name. God is calling you to make a life disciple.
runs dry, you can trust the Father. He is good and He satisfies. Come to the light, leave the empty shadow, trade the night. You can trust the Father. He is good and He satisfies. Send His Son, Jesus.